Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending Lab Manager's Quality and Compliance Digital Summit. My name is Mary Beth DiDonna, and I will be moderating this discussion. The most important output of a lab is the quality of the data, reports, and projects they produce. A quality management system governs the work processes needed to ensure the high-quality lab output. Different kinds of research and industries follow different sets of regulations and standards. Lab managers must protect the quality of their data, research, and projects by being familiar with the procedures and regulations under which they are governed. Lab managers can utilize different tools and ideas to make their jobs easier and help them to meet or exceed their required standards. Welcome to this session, Removing the Barriers to Obtaining and Validating a LIMS. Achieving compliance with GxP and ISO standards while maximizing efficiency are key priorities for most laboratories. However, the time and resources required to obtain and validate a LIMS systems can be a barrier for many labs. With a tool that automates the processes of running test scripts, go-lives of new software implementation is faster and the execution of regression tests for software upgrades is simplified. Additionally, with an automated tool, the likelihood of human error during manual execution of test scripts is significantly reduced, requiring less time and resources and faster time to market for your product. Our speakers today will discuss barriers to quality and compliance within the lab, how to overcome them and achieve quality standards, how having an automated validation framework can improve lab efficiency and productivity, and use cases for automated validation. Lab Manager likes our webinars to be very interactive, so we encourage you to send us your questions or comments at any point during today's webinar. Our speakers will address these questions during the Q&A session following their presentation. To ask a question or to make a comment, simply type your query into the Q&A box located on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll try to address as many questions as possible during our time together. If we run out of time, I will forward any unanswered questions to today's speakers and they can respond to you directly if possible. Additional resources for today's presentation are also located on the right-hand side of your screen under the Handouts tab. The Handouts tab also includes more information about our Lab Manager Academy management courses. I would like to remind you that the recording of this webinar will be available for free on demand after the conclusion of this event. And I would also like to extend a special thank you to our sponsors whose support allows Lab Manager to keep these webinars free of charge for our readers. So with that, I would like to introduce our three presenters for this webinar. Dimitri Sturmitsoglu is the Director of Quality and Regulatory Affairs at STARLIMS. Brendan McMahon is a software tester for STARLIMS, and Michael Spalding is CEO of Pacific Biolabs. Thank you all for joining us today. Please begin your presentation.
Hello, everybody. Excuse me. My name is Dimitri Sturmitsoglu, and I would like to start by introducing to everybody the STARLIMS as the company, and of course our quality management system. So what do we do? What we do is we provide software solutions that help labs manage their information needs, all while ensuring regulatory compliance and promoting laboratory and enterprise collaboration. We are based in Hollywood, Florida. And we have been around, the company has been around actually since the 80s. We are present in more than 45 countries, and we have more than 1,000 installations globally. Our company also has 3 ISO certifications, ISO 9001, 13485, and 27001 that has to do with information security. We are also registered with the FDA because we do have a couple of medical device products. Out of approximately 240 employees that we have globally, approximately half of them are actually based in Hollywood, Florida. We do have offices worldwide, and actually the next slide, you will see the locations. So we are present essentially in every region, Americas, EMEA, and APAC. A number of our customers are also global. They have a global presence, but we do have customers in different industries. That ranges from major pharmaceutical companies all the way to food and beverage, public health labs, forensics labs, environmental labs. Now, all those customers, of course, they have different needs, right? And the way we address those is by offering them solutions that are designed to be integrated, not just with other add-on solutions like analytics, mobile applications, but also with other software and even hardware that the customer may have. The way we do this, the way we offer high quality products is essentially we rely on a quality management system. And the bedrock of our QMS is really our quality policy, which is to improve healthcare and laboratory workflow processes by providing high quality, safe and effective informatics solutions. So for example, when we are designing and developing a product, the way we do it is we have 5 phases going from planning all the way to deployment. In the planning phase, of course, you plan, right? What would you actually be needing? And then, we have different milestones, different deliverables at each phase. On the last phase where you see deployment, that's where our professional services come in, where what they would typically do is install the software, do configurations, and if needed, some customizations. Our entire design and development process, it is in full alignment with ISO 9001, 13485, and CFR 820.30. We also are in alignment with the ISO 14971 as well. Here you can see, I'm not going to go through the slide. I just wanted to give everybody an overview of all the different deliverables that are going into in the different phases. So it is a lot of work that goes into it, but we want to make sure that at the end, the final product is of the highest quality possible. And one of the ways we try to achieve this, of course, is when we're developing the software, we have a number of design reviews to make sure that we catch any issues before we actually move on to our testing phase. Now, in the past, what we used to do is when it came time for test case development and actually execution, it was 100% manual. Now, as a result of that, during, when we were trying to introduce a new product or a new version of the product, it would take us a lot of time at the end when it came time to do the testing. That was a major pain point for us. And we also knew that this was also a major pain point for our customers when it came time for them to validate the product for their intended use. So I would like to hand over the presentation on to Brenton, where he will walk you guys through on how we actually were able to reduce the time it takes to perform our validation.
Thank you, Dimitris. So as Dimitris mentioned, I'm Brendan, and I wanted to talk to you today about a little bit about validation and verification and how automation significantly helps both of these endeavors when we are implementing any products within our environments, be it a laboratory or manufacturing plant. So to begin, I just wanted to specify that what I do here at STARLIMS is I do both verification and validation of the products that we offer. The verification is I'm verifying that the application meets the design that we specified in our documentation. And the validation is that is our product performing to the intended use that we say that the product can and will do. On your side, when it comes to implementing a product, primarily you're usually focused on validation. Verification can be done, but normally it's only done if you've made changes, something you just want to verify, a design change that you may have made occurred. So that's just some background on what it is that I do here. Now, when it comes to these stages of testing, verification, validation, regardless of what we're doing, one of the problems, as Dimitris mentioned, is that they both take a significant amount of time. For example, one of the products that we have here at STARLIMS, our quality manufacturing product, it is a very robust product offering. And what I try to do is break down what that means to something that's a bit easier to digest. The quality manufacturing product is really just 400 individual applications that all work with each other. And so the testing takes a long time because we have to verify all of that individual functionality works. Now, For that testing phase, those of you who have done product management, I'm going to show you this image here, and you'll probably laugh. This is a standard joke in project management circles, where when you're trying to plan something, you can focus on time, cost, or quality, and usually you can only pick two. And the problem being that if you focus on trying to make it not expensive, but you want high quality, then it's going to take a very long time to do. Or if you want to focus on having a lot of quality and you want to do it as quick as possible, it's going to be extremely expensive to do. Or if you want to do it as fast as possible and as cheap as possible, your quality is going to end up suffering, whatever it is that we implement. So with automation, what we are attempting to do, and we have done, is make it to where these types of decisions are no longer needed. I don't have to sacrifice one thing over the other, or I don't have to waste time or waste money while I'm trying to achieve the quality standards that I need. For example, in that same product that I mentioned, our quality manufacturing product, when we were doing manual testing only, this is a mixture of test cases that were both on Word and Excel, as well as some test cases that we had in digital tools like HPALM to manage our manual test cases. The entire testing phase, both the verification and validation phase, so that we could release our product to our customers, took over 20 weeks to do on average, and just generally over 20 weeks. That includes the testing team, myself, and the other testers running our test cases. If we find an issue, reporting those issues to our development team, the development team fixing those issues, the testing team retesting what we have already executed to verify that nothing else had been impacted by those changes, as well as to make sure that the changes did occur. All of those steps, 20 plus weeks. We converted about 98%, I believe is the number, of our testing activity to an automated testing framework for one of those upcoming QM releases that we did after a manual testing release. And we went from 20 weeks down to 4.5 weeks. And that's for the exact same steps. We still ran our test cases. If we found issues, we still reported them to our development team. The development team still fixed them. And we continued to run test cases as well as do regression testing for the entire QM product, which once again, if we wanted to break it down to what an easy to digest solution, it's about 400 individual applications all working with each other. It's a lot of testing that is done. So it's amazing what we were able to achieve in the amount of time and quality that we introduced as well. Because with those time savings, we could do more regression testing each time a bug may have been fixed, or each time a new release candidate went out the door where the development team said, okay, we've implemented 1 or 2 new features in this candidate. Let's make sure that everything is working properly. We can do more regression testing since it doesn't take as much time as the manual testing. In addition, one of the benefits of this as well is that our costs significantly were reduced, because the amount of time that was spent is no longer spent on testing, but it can be spent doing other tasks. Because with automated test cases, I have another computer doing the work. For example, right now as I'm giving this presentation on my test machine, I have a whole suite of test cases running that I've been running on and off for about a week now for some changes that we're making to our quality manufacturing product. So in the background on another machine, I have some test cases running, and that's a huge cost savings as well. When it comes to me as a salaried employee, I'm not being paid to just do these manual tests right now. I can do this presentation while I have test cases running. I can multitask. I can do more things, which is a huge cost savings. Another benefit as well is that we can do regression testing more often. We could do regression testing every week, every 2 weeks, as opposed to waiting until maybe we've planned our project and it's only until every 2 months that we can do regression testing based on the human power that we have when it comes to the availability of time. So with all these things said, what we decided to do is we made our automation, we made some automation test cases, which meant we made a framework that allows us to make automation test cases. And then we decided we should take that framework and make it available to our customers so that they can also use it to make test cases. And so we have what we call our STARLIMS automation kits, which include our framework for build and test cases. And we also include the test cases that we developed for the out-of-the-box product, so that you can get the same test cases that I use to verify that the product itself is working as intended. Now, for those that are not familiar with automation, regardless of tools or platforms, whatever it is that we're using, for automation, we have to develop a framework so that we can do automation. So what is a framework? Well, a framework is really just a way that we can interact with the elements that we have on the screen. I have an image here of one of our applications within our quality manufacturing product called equipment types. And in here, you can see that we have data grids, we have buttons like add and delete, we have a search field, we have menus on the left and the right. All of these objects that are on the screen, we need a way to identify them and click on them. That's what the framework does. And the framework is the hardest part of doing automation, because you want a robust way of locating the objects that you have on the screen and interacting with them the same way that a person would. And so that is the biggest benefit of our automation kit, is that you don't have to develop your own automation framework. You can use a framework that we've developed. Now, the way that our framework is composed is we've taken the applications that we have, we looked at the requirements that are present within them, and we've broken down all the functionality within those applications into individual test parts. Think of them as building blocks. So in this example, I have an application called Test Manager. And within Test Manager, I can add a test and I can delete a test if those were the only available functionality within that application. So what we do is we make two test parts, one called add test and one called delete test. So then anytime I want to make a test case, an automated test case, if I know I want to add a test within the Test Manager application, I can use that add test building block, that test part that we've created. And then I can take all of those building blocks from all the applications that are in the system, and I can combine them into the orders that I need so I can make a test case. So that way, as opposed to manual testing where I'm literally spelling out, open up application 1, click add test, verify that the prompt is open, enter in the information, verify the information was entered. The add test, there'll be a test part to open the application. There'll be a test part to add the test part. There'll be a test part to verify that the test was added after it was added. And all of those things will be captured within a log so that we have objective evidence that it was completed. Here's an example of one of those logs. So we can see here that I have a screenshot on the right of a log that was ran for a collection of our test cases for our base static table applications. And we can see that from this example, I had one of the logs that failed and the rest of them passed. And so I can easily see from these check marks and the X's what had passed and what had failed. In addition, I get a step-by-step summary of everything that occurred. It might be a bit hard to read, so I will read it. The first thing in the log says that we opened the client category application. We entered some text into a text editor. We clicked with the left mouse button to open up the application, and then it took a screenshot of the application. And that's another thing that's helpful, is that the validation and verification requirements of objective evidence are captured in these automation test cases. And that's one of the things that I know from personal experience when it comes to performing our testing that takes a huge chunk of time, is not just running the test cases, but proving that you've ran them, so that if, let's say, for us here at STARLIMS, if we were audited by, say, one of our customers, or if we were audited by some quality regulatory entity, we can prove that, yes, we are doing what we say we do. This is the evidence of it, and it's easy to read and available as needed. One of the benefits to all of this is that not only do I have a way of making a test case that is an automated fashion, that's easy to use because of the way that the framework is developed, and that I can capture this objective evidence, is that with those reductions in time, I can now focus on the validation that's needed to the true validation. And by true validation, I mean not the one-time validation that we do when we implement our products, but the continual validation. I know that I've spoken to a lot of customers, and not just for STARLIMS, but anything that they've put in their environments, any products that they've implemented. Some of our customers, they know that validation can take a long time. And what happens is they validate themselves into a box where they create systems that can never be updated. They don't update the operating system. They don't update their browsers. They don't update anything, because if you have to update something, you have to generally validate what you're doing again to make sure that everything is still working properly. And you get locked into this validation wormhole, is what I'll call it, where you want to make changes and you want to get updates, but you know that it's going to take time and effort, so you decide not to. We've solved that issue here. For example, Windows 11 just came out. And so very easily, if we want to make sure that Windows 11 is working with our product right now, I can install Windows 11 on a machine and I can run my entire suite of automation test cases. And I can verify, yeah, everything's working great on Windows 11, no problems. And so for a summary, I just wanted to explain that verification validation, it can definitely be time consuming. I know that most of us that have dealt with validation, we can agree that it is time consuming. Because of the time consumption, it can be very expensive to do. And it's also risky from a quality perspective, because if we're doing it manually, you're going to have human error. For example, if you take one of your manual test cases and you give it to 100 different people, you're guaranteed to get more than one result each time. Or on average, you're going to have more than one possible result. Whereas with an automated test case, if I execute it 100 times, I'm going to get the same result 100 times in a row. So what we've done to solve those issues is we created a framework. We are using a product called Test Complete and Test Execute from a company named SmartBear. What we've done is we've taken the framework that we've created, which is a core framework that identifies the elements within STARLIMS, and then a framework of the applications themselves, so that we can interact with those applications to perform test parts, such as add in a test or add in a sample, enter in a result. And we've packaged it all together with the test cases that we use ourselves. And this allows us in general to reduce the time needed to perform our verification validation activities, reduce overall costs, and improve quality. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael Spalding, who will talk to you more about how automation can improve validation in your environments.
Thanks, Brendan. Greetings, everyone. I am going to talk about what I call the real world benefits of automated validation testing for life sciences, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and my company and why STARLIMS has asked me to join in this presentation. So I'm currently serving as the CEO of Pacific Biolabs. I'll tell you a little bit more about Pacific Biolabs, but my entire career has been dedicated to delivering solutions, IT solutions to the life sciences CRO, independent lab industry. I've played IT leadership roles in both small independent companies. Pacific Biolabs is a small 100-person single site company. Northview Labs, where I started my career, was also a small company. And then I spent 13 years at SGS, global CRO, in various IT leadership roles. And in all these roles, I've been responsible for delivering solutions to life sciences standards compliant with the FDA and European Part 11, Annex 11, and data integrity requirements, and have managed validation of many systems, both small scale, single station laboratory instrument systems, to medium scale and large scale life sciences IT systems. At SGS, we had network of 18 labs where I implemented QMS and LIMS solutions. And I also had to defend the compliance of these systems in both client and regulatory audits. And so I know and have a lot of experience with what the auditors, what the regulators are looking for in validation of systems. And so that's really where ultimately where the rubber meets the road in ensuring that these systems comply with those requirements and the expectations. And I'm currently leading a digital transformation of Pacific Biolabs, and we are implementing paperless workflows built on STARLIMS. So we've recently become a STARLIMS customer, and so I'll tell you more about that. Just to tell you a little bit about Pacific Biolabs. Again, we are an independent CRO. We serve the medical device, pharma, and biotech industries. And we provide laboratory testing services to GMP, GLP regulations, supporting medical device testing and research services that we do in vivo and in vitro. We do toxicology services, as well as biocompatibility, microbiology, sterility assurance, and analytical chemistry services. And I actually am very passionate about what I do, and it's because of the really what you see in our mission statement for Pacific Biolabs. And this was true for my whole career, because CROs in this space, we provide services in a critical chain of the delivery of medical products to patients. And we're this company I'm currently involved in, we support more of the early stage development, and when companies are trying to prepare products and submit them for regulatory approval. And my previous company, it was that type of support, as well as supporting the compliance and quality of drug products from a manufacturer. So it's a really important role, and I feel I'm always been very excited to be a part of that, and we get to see a lot of the kind of the future new products that are coming to the market too. But I'm also extremely passionate about what I call this next statement about the project that we're leading here, Lab of the Future initiative. And this was something that I was also involved in implementing at SGS. Where the life sciences CROs have been traditionally very heavily paper-based, and massive volumes of paper, cumbersome processes. What I'm leading now is an initiative to transform our processes to digital paperless processes. It's been a real challenge in the life science industry, and a lot of it comes back to the regulations and the challenges of validating systems, and to the extent that it's kind of held back a lot of progress to me in IT for life sciences. So I'm really excited to be part of this. And of course, we're building our solution. The cornerstone of the solution will be the STARLIMS system, and we are leveraging their electronic laboratory notebook, LES, the lab execution system, which is a new module that will take the place of the laboratory worksheets, paper worksheets that we use in our processes. And SDMS is for the capturing of test data from the instruments. So I'm going to talk now about the benefits that this automated validation framework brings in the real world application of it. You heard Brendan talk a lot about the benefits for STARLIMS, and a lot of software vendors have implemented tools like this for their own internal purposes to expedite the internal validation of systems. Vendors who provide solutions for the GMP industry have to make sure that these solutions are developed and validated in a way that can support the requirements of the end user. So it's beneficial for them, but what was exciting to me was to hear that STARLIMS was offering this tool to their customers. It's something that they were trying to pitch it to me, and they told me a little bit about it, and it was not a tough sell for them to. I signed up right away because I saw immediately the benefits of it. We in validation theory, we talk a lot about risk reduction, and with delivering IT systems, the risk it's not just about the regulatory or compliance risks, but it's also business and project risks. And a tool like this, in a lot of ways, can really reduce the risk of a project and provide tremendous benefits. And life sciences companies are, by their nature of serving, having to comply with regulatory requirements, and because of the risk of adverse findings and regulatory audits, they tend to be extremely risk averse. And again, especially regarding regulatory risks. What that has led to in the past is a lot of companies will had taken a kind of more is better approach, resulting in massive validations with complex validations, just extremely large projects. This was something I've dealt with frequently throughout my career, and I've always it's always a struggle to find the balance between how much testing and validation you need to do to satisfy the auditors versus the trade-off of, if you do less, then you're going to be increasing your risk. But with an automated validation testing tool, you can really reduce that risk dramatically. One of course, the key ways, Brendan talked about this, is eliminating the risks of manual testing. The manual testing of systems, it's a really cumbersome process. You have to write these manual test scripts to describe step by step what the tester has to do to in a repeatable way. So you're recording like keystrokes that they have to follow to execute this test script, and then challenge the system in certain aspects of the system and produce a result that supports the compliance of the system to whatever the particular regulations, like testing electronic signatures, testing, and so developing these test scripts is a real pain, frankly, because it's extremely cumbersome. But then actually executing the testing is a real challenge, and more often than not, we run into errors in the testing process that end up being due to this manual testing, and I'll talk more about that. But that's a huge benefit. This tool can dramatically reduce the scope of validation, and one of the ways that it does that is by automating the validation of out-of-the-box features. So, out of the box, STARLIMS is offering test scripts that for their out-of-the-box product that we can just run automatically and with almost no effort to, and other vendors will provide manual test scripts that you can buy at some significant cost, and then execute those at a significant time investment. And it was always, to me, kind of a make-work project, because you're testing out-of-the-box functionality the vendor's already tested, but some of the regulators are expecting that. It's with risk-based validations, you're seeing less of a need for that out-of-the-box testing, but this validation framework allows automated testing of those, so it's just kind of a no-brainer. You do the testing. Of course, this you can do this testing with dramatically increased robustness and reproducibility, because you don't have the problems of humans doing the testing, as Brendan talked about. But one of the things I was really excited about with this toolkit is that it also supports automated testing of the configured system, and what this means is that the specific configurations that we require for Pacific Biolabs, it's not customization. We're just using their configuration, but we're able to reconfigure these test scripts to support testing of the system as it's configured for us, and that's a huge benefit for us. There is obviously some effort involved in customizing those test scripts, but you would have to do that in creating manual test scripts. So, and then once you've done that, as Brendan talked about, you get the benefits of the being able to reproduce that testing. So one of the this is one of the most painful things I've dealt with throughout my career in supporting life sciences IT. And I love this slide that I was able to find about the challenges of dealing with paper, and it is literally just overwhelming. And the paper, I talked about paper in our laboratory processes. The amount of paper that you generate in a traditional validation is just unbelievable, because you have massive amounts of validation test scripts, and then the test results and screenshots, and it just goes on and on and on, to the point where it's it again leads to why I'm so passionate about eliminating paper in our processes. But what that also does, because of the effort and the cost involved in validations, is life sciences companies traditionally have just been kind of really reluctant to implement IT systems. It's getting better, but and you kind of have no choice. But what often happens is, there's an initial reluctance to implement systems, but then we also get, and Brendan talked about the wormhole, and I talk about it as upgrade paralysis, because you get locked into a version of the system that you validated, put a huge amount of effort into it. And then the vendor, historically, they only release new releases once every year to 18 months. So it wasn't such a big deal. Now with cloud-based systems, they're releasing updates every 3 months. And as a life sciences company, you're like, well, this a lot of work to, that feature, we can probably live without that. But you end up compromising on bringing on new functionality. So the traditional approach is really at odds with the modern delivery model for cloud-based systems, where the vendors are pushing out changes very frequently. I say here 2 to 7 years. This is not. I'm not even exaggerating that. We often at SGS and at my current company, we have systems that have been in place, locked into current. We still have Windows XP systems, because the effort to revalidate these systems, we have a very small staff, and it's just a lot to take on. So you just get locked into these old systems, missing out on new functionality, lost opportunity costs. I talked about the challenges with cloud-based systems. And with these, automated validation testing, you can revalidate version upgrades in a fraction of the time that it took historically. Brendan also mentioned the challenge with OS and platform upgrades, and this is more and more of a problem with the security environment that we're all facing with our IT systems, constant threat of malware, and the historical model was, we not only lock in a version of the application, but also a version of the operating system. And I got a lot of pushback at SGS when I had to push the corporate IT standard that we couldn't. We had to roll out security updates on a regular basis to our systems, and our quality people were saying, "Hey, we can't do it because these are validated systems; they're locked down." And so it was a real problem. A toolkit like this allows you to revalidate the system just in a blink of an eye, compared to the effort that it would have taken. So you can satisfy both the IT corporate group that wants to push out those security upgrades, and the quality and validation teams that want to ensure that we test everything that we roll out. So that's a real game changer. And lastly, I'm going to talk about a buzzword, and if you're delivering IT solutions, and this is the time to value, optimizing time to value. If vendors who are pushing cloud solutions, this is one of their big pitches. We're not talking much about the cloud offering from STARLIMS in this presentation, but it's something that can dramatically reduce the timeline up front to get a system live. And of course, one of the big selling points is time to value. what normally took 6 to 9 months just to get your test and validation environments and your production environments up and running, you can do in a fraction of the time. Well, with validation testing, the validation testing is typically, historically, been more on the back end, but it's always on the critical path to go live for systems. And frankly, I've seen validation, the validation requirements of systems really be the difference between the success and failure of a global IT system. Because the validation, it can take so long that it just really undermines the project as a whole. So obviously, anything that can shorten this critical path and the validation component of that is a huge advantage. It does this by dramatically reducing the effort required for the writing of manual validation test scripts. Again, for the configured system, you are going to have some upfront configuration of those scripts for the configured system, but still, it's something that you do once, and then you don't have to repeat it. But the execution time for the test scripts, again, this manual validation testing, that execution time is extreme. I mean, we can have a test script that tests a tiny fraction of the functionality of the system that takes 2 days to execute, and then if you get an unexpected result during that testing, you have to halt the testing. You have to, do an assessment, what went wrong. And as I mentioned before, and I would say 90% of the errors that we would run into in validation testing were either due to an error in the way the test script was written, and you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, well I followed that step, but when I do that, it leads to this error, and then you realize, the script was missing a step that should have been there. You obviously find that out with these automated tools as you're developing them. But then the other thing is that the validation tester just makes a mistake and they didn't follow the test script. But those adverse events, if it could lead to a finding that the product has a flaw in it. And of course, those are serious, and you need to deal with them and address them and come up with a mitigation. But like I said, in most cases, errors that we would run into were just errors in the actual test execution or writing of the test script. But those there's a lot of scrutiny on those events, and so you have to document them, and real pain. So that these automated tools can dramatically improve that situation, and of course, just an overall reduction in the timeline. And as I said, anything that can shorten the time to value has a major beneficial impact on ROI. We did a implementation of a system at SGS, and we ended up running into delays, and our whole ROI model was built on a certain go live time when we would start getting benefit from the system, and it's cost savings, which is how we justified the investment in the system. And a 6-month delay in the project completely undermined our ROI model, and we had a lot of explaining to do. So it's if you can shorten that, reduce the risk. As I said, that's a business and a project risk, but it's a huge issue in delivering life sciences solutions. So this last slide just compares the benefits, to a small and global organization. And when I put this slide together, I was thinking there'd be some dramatic differences, and I was actually surprised at how similar the benefits are. Now, the challenges are quite different. There's a lot of similar challenges, but a lot of different challenges in a global implementation versus a small company. On the global side, they're large, complex systems, complex requirements, trying to meet all the different users, different countries' requirements. So a lot of configuration typically required, and leading to very complex validation efforts. And again, the development and execution of that validation testing is historically a massive effort, adding literally months to the critical path on on a global LIMS system or a QMS system, it would typically add 3 to 6 months to the timeline. And one of the frustrating things for me at SGS was I often saw systems that would take so long, and there'd be delays not just related to validation, but to the development or implementation of the systems. But it would take so long that by the time we got it live at all 18 sites, it was essentially already dated, and we already had to start rolling out the next system. So that could be extremely frustrating. Small company challenges, it's at the opposite end of the scale. We have extremely small implementation teams, limited bandwidth because they have a lot of responsibilities, and of course limited budget. I talked about this validation barrier. There was a reluctance here at Pacific Biolabs to implement a LIMS. They've been on a homegrown system for probably 5 to 7 years longer than they wanted to, and some of it was just the overall scope of the project, but a lot of it is that historically the projects would just stall on validation because we don't have a lot of expertise with validation. So it's historically been a real problem. One of the things that we do at a small company to manage the scope of a big project like this is stage the rollout of functionality. So instead of going live with all of the system, we might say, well, let's start with the reagent module and the equipment module, and then 6 months later do the core login and receiving. So this was how we would manage it. And again, so by being able, and a lot of that was because of managing the validation effort. So, and again, for the small company, this is something I could put on both sides, though, is a fear of increased regulatory risk and insufficient validation. That's a challenge for any life sciences solution. So again, the benefits that the automated validation enables for both environments, substantial savings in validation labor costs, obviously a huge issue with getting a budget approval for a big project in a global corporation, and for a small company, it's just being able to afford it overall. Expedited, implementation. I mentioned the site-to-site deployment. I didn't talk a lot about that aspect of the benefits of this validation kit, but at SGS, we had to roll out our solutions at 18 labs, and you had to repeat the local validation at each site, and just kind of a make work project, but you really had to do it with a automated validation tool. You could just dramatically reduce that validation time at each site, and really, again, have the validation can focus on the risks that are important to each local site. And at Pacific Biolabs, again, it allows us to roll out the entire functionality in a much more expedited way. Reducing implementation timeline is critical in both cases for ROI. And I mentioned, the benefits of getting more frequent feature updates, which is more and more of an issue with a modern software delivery model. So that's really all I have. And I think at this point, we are going to open it up for question and answer session. And I think.
Okay. Great. Thanks very much. So at this time, we are going to move into our question and answer session with the audience. For those of you in the audience who may have joined us late, you can send in your questions or your comments by typing them into the Q&A box, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. As a reminder, we do have some handouts in that handouts tab that's also on the right-hand side of your screen. So to our speakers, Dimitris, Brendan, and Michael, thank you for a great presentation. Let's move on to the Q&A. We're going to start with this first question up top here. What technical skills are required to work with the STARLIMS automated verification kit?
Yeah, sure. I can answer that one. For the verification kit, the core framework, or both parts of the framework, the core framework, and if you wanted to use those test parts to make test cases, you need to have some basic JavaScript knowledge to actually work with the kit. We designed it in a way to where the test parts, it's very, very, very basic JavaScript knowledge. And by that, I mean, you just need to know what a variable is, what a function is, and what a parameter is. And pretty much that's it. If you can understand those core concepts, which you could teach yourself within a week, you can make a test case using our framework. The core framework does require more advanced JavaScript knowledge, as if you were a developer. And but the way that we design this is that hopefully that part of the framework you don't have to touch. We've created that so that it will just work.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. We're going to skip around a bit. There should be another question with a little red circle next to it. Are there any standards for software validation?
I mean, I can take that question, at least from a life sciences perspective. There are, regulations that there's both in, the very dated regulations from the FDA or the Part 11 and even the Annex 11. What the regulators now are kind of framing things much more from a data integrity standpoint. And so both from the FDA and the different European and other regulators, there is specific guidance on the expectations of a validated system. So there are some standards out there that, but again, a lot of it comes down to much more the current approach is more of a risk-based approach. What's the actual impact on the actual data integrity, and of course the objective of the validation is to ensure that the system is properly ensuring data integrity. But again, all of the regulators have some specific regulations, but FDA is pretty comprehensive, and their data integrity regulations. So I can get some more specifics on the specific regulations if anyone is interested.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michael. We have another question here that says, do you also capture screenshots?
Yeah, using the automation framework we have in that example log that I shared, it not only has a log of the steps that were done, that were performed, but it captures a screenshot of those interactions. So if I am clicking on a button, it will take a screenshot to show I've clicked on that button on the screen. If it's verifying that a record is in the data grid, it will take a screenshot to show that the record is within the data grid. It will also take screenshots if something were to fail, so that we have evidence of failure, not just of success.
All right, great, thanks. Looking at the clock, I think we have a time for a couple more questions here. How do you think regulatory authorities will view the use of automated testing tools in lieu of manual testing for a validated life sciences GxP laboratory system?
Yeah, I can take that question, and it's definitely something that I think will be a discussion point in life sciences companies. But I think that my perspective is that the regulatory authorities will actually embrace the use of these tools, because for all of the reasons that they're not so interested in the amount of time it takes us to do the testing or the costs. But they are interested in the robustness and quality of that testing. And I think the arguments in favor of automated validation from that perspective, that it really improves the reliability and the robustness and the completeness of testing. So, my view is that the regulators will embrace it. They will expect to see evidence that these tools are doing what you expect them to do, so that what Brendan mentioned, that they are able to produce screenshots in it. So auditors, of course, are not machines, so they're going to want to see what the output is from this tool that shows the evidence that it's done this testing, because you could obviously just run a virtual test that really didn't do anything, that wouldn't satisfy them. But if they can be convinced that these tools are doing the job that we need them to do, I think they'll embrace them. And I think there also is going to be, by the way, probably some expectation of validation or verification of the use of this tool, which is something I assume that STARLIMS some internal documentation that, about their own testing of this tool and the reliability of it.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
I was actually
Oh,
going
go ahead, I'm
to
sorry.
add that essentially. I just wanted to add that essentially anything that you do to reduce risk, the regulators will always like. In this case, of course, going from a manual to an automated system, that's the way to do it. That's the way to go. You're reducing your risk for manual errors dramatically, right? But yes, the last point I wanted to make that Michael remade was to make sure you validate the actual tool itself prior to use. That's critical.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. I think we have time for one more question here, and that is, what is the cost of STARLIMS?
The short answer I guess I can give is I don't really know. It depends on different factors. But of course, investing in a LIMS system, it's a substantial investment. So what I would encourage people to do is when they're looking at different LIMS vendors, to actually audit them before they sign a contract, right? Because you want to look at your total cost, in terms of you want to, when you make the investment in the LIMS system, you want to make sure it's of the highest quality. And one of the ways to do that, to reduce your risk as a lab, is to make sure you're dealing with a vendor that they have a robust quality management system in place. As to the actual cost, I do know that it varies, but I'm not, Brandon, I don't know if you have a better answer to that.
It varies based on the product, it based on the implementation, what is being implemented. It can vary. So the best answer would be to contact STARLIMS directly, contact us so that we can reach out to you and figure out what you need and how we can help you out.
The one thing I will say as a customer of STARLIMS is that I was actually impressed with how low you guys have set the price point on this validation tool. And so I would recommend for any customers who are having to implement validated systems, the validation framework that STARLIMS is offering is a no-brainer. It's in terms of the cost to benefit.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. And as a reminder to the person who asked this question, we do have a record of your contact information and your name. So we will pass your inquiry on to the STARLIMS team, and you can have an offline conversation about your requirements and what you want in a system. And then you can determine from there what you need to do. So again, thank you all for a great presentation. And this does bring us to the end of our webinar today. I would just like to remind all of you that this webinar will be available on demand shortly following this live presentation. We will send you an email once that recording is ready. You can also visit the Quality and Compliance event website, and you can see that URL at the bottom of your screen right now. We will post it there when it is ready. So on behalf of Lab Manager, I'd like to thank Dimitris Dermatzoglu, Brendan McMahon, and Michael Spaulding for all of the hard work they put into their presentation. And I'd like to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Once again, thank you to our sponsors, Agilent, the Baker Company, BioVia, the Joint Commission, STARLIMS, and Waters Corporation, whose support allows Lab Manager to keep these webinars free of charge for our readers. Finally, I would like to invite all of you to attend the other webinars offered by Lab Manager's Quality and Compliance Digital Summit. Our next presentation, Targeting Intrinsic Compliance, will take place in just a little while at 2 p.m. Eastern, and we invite you to please join us. For more information on all of our upcoming or on-demand webinars, or to learn more about the latest tools and technologies for the laboratory, please visit our website at labmanager.com. We hope you can join us again. Thank you to all of you for being part of our Quality and Compliance Digital Summit, and we hope you have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.